effectively go to the election promising tax increases. What do you make of that?
Look, I understand this wasn't expected in Labor's budget, so it took us by surprise, and obviously we had to reach a decision quickly so the normal processes couldn't be gone through. But obviously it was an unusual and uncomfortable position for us to be going to the election saying we were going to repeal an income tax cut.
Was it a mistake?
I think in hindsight, yes, it was. I think there's an argument, strong argument, that the party room more broadly was not involved enough in policy formulation and discussion. And I think, for good reasons, the party room prioritised discipline and unity in the last term, but on the expectation that the policy work was being done and we would have good things to sell at the election. And I think, look, I think it's fair to say that our policy agenda we took to the election was underwhelming, and it's empirically true that it did not attract a lot of voters. Well, I think if we wanted defence to be front and centre of this election, we would have needed to make that commitment and the announcement before the election. And I do remember having conversations with a number of colleagues saying, when is our announcement on defence spending coming? Because this is the sort of thing, if you do during a campaign, it'll disappear within half a day or a day, and that seems to be what happened.
It looks like, to me, the entire policy process was a shambles. There are suggestions that mortgage interest deduction policy Michael Sukkar had was dusted off 2 days before you launched. Do you think it was a shambles?
Oh, look, I don't think it was optimal. I don't know if I'd use that word, but clearly, you know, the policy we rolled out, often it didn't have the costings and the supporting argumentation and narrative to accompany it when the policy was rolled out, which suggested it was prepared and put out there at short notice. I don't think the timing of the rollout of our policy, some of these things, particularly on small business and different tax rates for small business, they're pretty complicated things to understand and explain. Rolling that out on Easter Saturday from memory, of course you're going to get lost in the fog of war. And I think there are clearly lessons there. But more broadly, I mean, there's the conduct of the campaign and there's policies. I think, you know, the error here is the policy development cycle over 3 years. We should have been road testing these, red team, blue teaming them, contesting them internally before we decide to roll them out, and then making sure we've got third-party groups, industry groups coming out to support these policies.
And Sarah Henderson, she didn't even get a policy out there in the end.
No, it seems not. I read that in the newspaper. It seems there are a lot of shadow ministers. And look, maybe there are good reasons for that. I wasn't part of this process, right? You know, not every shadow minister is going to get their policy out. But I think it seems now that, you know, people who were involved in the leadership team, and to be honest, they have to wear some of the blame for this themselves, are now saying, oh, we couldn't get anything through. Well, you know, we in the backbench, people like me, rely on not just the leader and his team, but the leadership team to make sure that they are doing the right work that needs to be done for the benefit of all of us.
What do you make of this falling out I've just reported between Peter Dutton and Andrew Hastie?
Look, I don't have any particular insight in it. You know, I'm hesitant to weigh in. There's always recriminations after an election that people say that, you know, if only I'd been listened to, or if only this had happened and whatnot. But I think, look, the way in which our defence policy was rolled out left a lot to be desired, and I don't think that was on Andrew.
Now, you were a former Australian ambassador to Israel, yet there was no offer by Peter Dutton to make you a shadow minister. Do you think there was a view from him, my people and the other people?
Look, I don't think I had any personal animus from Peter or anything else like that. I think he respected my abilities, but I do think we had people on the front bench who weren't pulling their weight, who didn't have the capability, the profile, the policy heft to take the best offering to the election. And, you know, leaders have to make decisions about the shadow cabinet on all sorts of criteria, you know, geography, gender, you know, faction, all that sort of stuff. But I don't think there was enough merit in that mix, would be my honest assessment.
So you're keen to serve in the shadow cabinet this time?
I'm keen to serve in whatever role I can be of help, but I think I could be, yeah.
Have either Angus Taylor or Susan Lee spoken to you about portfolios at this point?
No, and, you know, frankly, I would be appalled if they had. I'm not interested in people trading support.
So they haven't promised you a front bench spot?
No, and I haven't asked for one, and nor would I. And I think any prospective leadership candidate that was going around trading portfolios for support is taking the completely wrong approach to this.
Well, there's reports Susan Lee is. Do you think she is?
I don't believe she is, no, but I also don't believe Angus is. I haven't had that conversation.
All right. I mean, I've got to tell you that you might be one of the couple of votes that decide this thing, so it's lucky for me that you're on the show. It's even been put to me that you've kind of I don't want to use the word committed, but you've indicated interest in voting for both candidates. So which way do you think you're going to go, and is that a fair characterisation?
No, I think a fair characterisation is I've given every candidate who's put themselves forward for leadership a good audience and interrogated them on how they'd want to do things differently, how they would run the party, how they would consult with the backbench, how policy making would work, how they think we would appeal to this large swathe of voters that we've lost. That's the most important thing to me. I need to be convinced about whoever takes on the leadership of the party has the right plan and the vision and the honesty and sort of capacity for self-reflection to recognise their own contributions to what's gone wrong and the depth of the malaise in which we find us.
Has anyone convinced you yet?
Well, I'm not going to announce it on this show. I'm sorry to.
Sounds like someone has.
No, look, I think I'm genuinely, I'm genuinely open-minded about this, and I don't think I'm alone in that regard. A lot of us are wrestling with this. A lot of my colleagues are wrestling with this.
Because I just told you before we came on camera, there was this infamous incident where Mark Latham beat Kim Beazley by 1 vote, and it was Robert McClelland in the shower that particular morning thought, oh, I'll go for Latham. Do you think you're going to have an epiphany on Tuesday morning?
No, I think, look, I'm slowly reaching my decision, but I don't need to announce it right now, and I haven't completely crystallised my thinking.
If it is a close vote, will that be an issue for the party going forward?
Well, look, I think it will be a close vote, and I think it's very important that whatever the outcome is, everyone respects the result and everyone gets behind the new leader and makes sure that they have the best prospects of success as possible. I know that's not going to be easy, but we don't have the luxury of being able to tear ourselves apart over the next year or two. Our party room's not big enough. Our level of public support is not high enough to indulge ourselves in that way.
Our election analyst, Tom Connell, has called Kooyong for Monique Ryan overnight, but it's very tight. Do you think Josh Frydenberg could have won the seat, and is this a missed opportunity for him?
I don't. Look, I think Amelia Hamer ran a good campaign. You've got to remember, Monique Ryan had one of the highest primary votes in 2022 of all of the Teals, in the low 40s from memory. So she was always going to be a difficult one to knock off. I think Amelia Hamer has run a good campaign. Look, Josh was not interested in running at the last election, so it's a bit of a hypothetical, but I think, you see we were up against it, and Tim Wilson had a great result in Goldstein. I think we've probably hung on in Bradfield. But in the other Teal seats, to be honest, we made up some ground, but we didn't win them back. And some of the Teal seats we went backwards.
But Josh could have won that, and then he could be leader. Let's face it.
Well, it's something for Josh to think about. There's often these sliding doors moments in politics, right, where you choose not to take a path. But I think Josh has said he remains open about his political future. I'd like to see him involved at some point in the future, but how and when that comes about is a matter for him. What
do you make of Jacinta Price's defection and her immediately running for deputy leader?
Well, look, she's welcome as a member of the CLP. As I understand it, she's welcome to sit in either the Liberals or the Nationals party room. For her first 3 years in Parliament, she chose to sit in the Nationals party room. She's now welcome to sit in the Liberals party room. There's no particular process she needs to go through other than advise the CLP executive, I think, and that's been done. So, look, as we welcome the addition, but I'm also conscious that some of the Nationals feel quite aggrieved about this, and I can understand their feelings in that regard as well.
She got to do her time before she becomes deputy leader, or is it time to throw a bit of caution to the wind on that one?
Well, she's perfectly entitled to put her hand up. If she's been accepted into the Liberal party room, any of us can put our hands up as deputy leader. And I think the party room will decide that. People will have different views about that issue, though, I think.
Do you think she's a future leader?
Well, she needs to be in the lower house to be a future leader. So I think there's a lot of people who could be future leaders who are in the Senate at the moment, but not in the House.
Would you rate yourself in there?
No, and I'm sorry, I'm hasten to add, I'm not including myself here, but until that time, it's just that.
Yeah, sure. I guess she could have run for Lingiari. Now, do you believe it's possible the coalition will split? Because it seems likely that the Nationals, according to my information, will dump the 2050 net zero target.
Look, I think, we need to revisit a lot of things after this election result, and the arrangement with the Nationals, the coalition agreement, is one of those, in my view. We need to make sure that that agreement and our partnership is working in both of our interests. It can't be, one party's interests at the expense of the other. So I think, once new leaders are chosen, I'd expect the leaders of both parties to sit down and work out some of this stuff. But at the moment, I'd say, look, the Liberals' poor electoral fortunes is not helping the Nationals at all, because it means they're never going to get back into government. So, neither they nor us have an interest in the Liberals' political stocks continuing to fall.
Well, the Nationals were big drivers of the nuclear policy. Do you think it's time to dump that policy?
I think it's time to revisit that policy, but I think that's not unique. I mean, any and all the policies we took to the election, we will need to review and revisit. Doesn't mean we're going to dump them all, but it also doesn't mean we automatically keep them. And I think with that policy, my view is that the public is not hostile to nuclear power generation, but the concern they have, and Labor weaponised this and used it as a scare campaign, is how will it be paid for and funded, and what will the cost be? And I think that, undoubtedly that hurt us during the campaign. People, on booths and at polling stations were raising this as a concern, that how are you going to pay for nuclear? As I said, Labor weaponised that against us, but we need to have a better answer to that.